Hailie Deegan could be returning to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series as early as 2026, and Cleetus McFarland has confirmed he'll return to racing once again in 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 Tableau TV scheme that we'll see next weekend at Kansas Speedway. Honestly, I really like the look of this car. I think that the DJM Racing team knocked this one out of the park. I love the football look to it. It looks great. Looking forward to the racetrack at Kansas. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byron's 2025 Valvoline Blood Cancer United scheme that we'll see at the Charlotte Roval in a couple weekends. I really like the look of this car. It's one of my favorite Valvoline paint schemes, and it's also for a really awesome and great cause as well. It looks really, really good. It looks fantastic. They knocked this one out of the park. Looking forward to seeing the racetrack at the Charlotte Roval. In my opinion, it looks great and looks very solid, and it's a nice looking car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. Now, AJ Allmendinger, of course, won the pole for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. That was the first pole for AJ Allmendinger in the NASCAR Cup Series since Watkins Glen in 2015. It has been 10 years since AJ, of course, had won the pole. The last time he won the pole was a long time ago at this point, and for him to win the pole for the Cup race, it was incredible. It's also the first time the Cog Racing had won the pole at a non-road course track or super speedway track as well. So I think that's absolutely phenomenal to see. Congratulations to AJ on getting his first pole in quite some time. A massive and great accomplishment for him, and I think it's phenomenal to see because I want to see AJ have success. Good to see him go out there, get his first pole in a long time. Really good stuff in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Moose Fraternity. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that first Moose Fraternity has signed an extension as a sponsor with Trackhouse Racing through the 2027 season. It was also confirmed as well that Ross Chastain has his contract also with the team through 2027 as well. Moose Fraternity has been with the organization since 2022. They've been a little sponsor of Ross Chastain since around 2021 when, of course, he went full-time with Chip Ganassi Racing. And now they're going to continue working with the Trackhouse Racing team through 2027. This is a really, really big deal. It's a big sponsor deal as well. It's big for Ross Chastain because we now know that Ross Chastain won't be going anywhere anytime soon. It will be staying with the program at least for the next couple years. Pretty exciting stuff, and glad to see Moose Fraternity is going to be sticking around and will be there at least through the 2027 Cup season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, we'll talk about the tire from the Cup Series race at Bristol in just a short little bit, but let's talk about the amount of caution laps we saw from Bristol Motor Speedway as well. For the Cup race, we saw 137 laps of caution during the Cup Series race at Bristol. That is the most laps in Cup modern history with laps under caution throughout the event. We saw a lot of long cautions. We saw 15 or 16 yellows throughout the night. Not the record for most cautions in the modern era in the Cup Series, but it's the record for the amount of caution laps. And we saw a lot of long yellows, a lot of drivers bringing a lot of chaos to attention, and it was absolutely a lot of wild stuff going on throughout the event. But it was a fun night overall, all things considered. We saw a chaotic night and event. Pretty incredible stuff. Pretty wild to see 137 laps under caution. I think that's absolutely unbelievable to see. Really good to see those numbers coming out. 137 laps under yellow for a Cup Series race is really crazy in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. Now, Corey Heim in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway had a really strong and really good run and scored a 6th place finish. The crazy stat, noted by someone I believe named Bailey on Twitter, they note that Corey Heim has more top 15s in the NASCAR Cup Series this year than Riley Herbst has had so far in 2025. Riley Herbst, I believe, this year only has one top 15 finish. Corey Heim has 2 top 15s so far this year, and I believe he's got more top 10s than Riley Herbst also has this season. It's absolutely crazy to see. Corey Heim, in my opinion, should be in that 35 car at this point. He is a way more talented driver than Riley Herbst, but the big reason why Riley Herbst is in that car in the first place is because Riley brings sponsorship and funding to the table, and Corey Heim doesn't bring as much funding to the table, though I will say the Robin Hood sponsorship, I think, is going to help Corey Heim out in a pretty big way going forward into the future. But I think it's pretty wild stats to see, and again, it just shows that Corey Heim's a much more talented driver and deserves to be full-time in Cup. I really hope he does get that chance in the near future to be in the Cup Series full-time because he's way too talented to be racing the lower series. We'll see if that happens going forward into the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about FDNY Racing, as they confirmed earlier today that they will not be attempting the NASCAR Cup Truck Series race at Talladega Superspeedway, and their focus now will be going into 2026. I believe they had to confirm that Brian Doza was going to be the driver of the number 28 truck at Talladega Superspeedway, but now their focus will be transitioning over to getting prepared for Daytona next year. This is disappointing news here because that's one truck in the field. I get that FDNY Racing is not the fastest organization in the world, but hearing that an organization, a team like this that you want to see in the field, because you want to see as many trucks out there as possible, hearing that a team like that will not be attempting the Truck Series race at Talladega is definitely disappointing news to hear, because I want to see as many teams out there as possible, but it isn't the most surprising and shocking thing in some ways, in shape or form, honest. But it's disappointing that a team that have been planning to run the event will not be running. I think it's disappointing and unfortunate news to hear. I really hope they attempt more races this year, but it sounds like they won't be for 2025 anymore. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Isaac Kitzmiller. Now, one story that kind of went under the radar during the race at Bristol for the ARCA event was the ARCA East Championship race was going on. And Isaac Kitzmiller, who led the points going in this race over Tyler Wright, due to his consistency, he would come off the corner at the end and pick up the 2025 ARCA East Championship. While Isaac Kitzmiller did not win a race in the ARCA East Series this year, nor did he lead any laps in these series this year, he was a lot more consistent than Tyler Wright, who had a lot of issues throughout the season. Yes, I believe Tyler Wright did score a win or two this year in ARCA East. I could be wrong, though. But also, of course, Max Reese scooped up a ton of wins this year once he did turn 15. But Isaac Kitzmiller had a lot of consistency. Now, I will say I'm pretty disappointed, but I'm not surprised to see that Fox did not interview Isaac Kitzmiller. I think if you are the ARCA East champion, you probably should get interviewed because you earn the right to get interviewed, in my opinion, and the fact they didn't do that was really disappointing to see. But it doesn't surprise or shock me because Fox, which we'll be talking about here in just a short little bit, continues to drop a ball, seems like on a week-by-week basis. So I'm not surprised to see they didn't interview him, but at the same token, same time, it's really awesome for Isaac to get it done. There is a chance he could be full-time at ARCA next year, potentially. Who knows at this point? But once again, congratulations to Isaac Kitzmiller on winning the ARCA East Championship. He earned that championship, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Robert Schwartzman. Now, there has been some talk and conversations about the unknown future of Prema Racing in IndyCar for 2026, and many people in the paddock have believed a rumor going around about Robert Schwartzman being unhappy about racing in IndyCar currently at the moment. Well, on Wednesday, Robert Schwartzman actually released a statement kind of addressing the false rumors around that for 2026. He still wants to be racing IndyCar once again in 2026. He also says the facts of him not being wanting to continue racing IndyCar 2026 and not being happy about it are untrue at this point, and he is committed to continue racing in IndyCar in 2026. There were definitely times this year where Robert Schwartzman had a little bit of a frustrating season, but I can't really blame Robert for some of the financial issues that have been going on. It's no secret there's been some financial trouble with Prema currently at the moment, which is why I think these statements are going to be released, and I hate it for him because I think Robert Schwartzman is someone who's extremely positive from a lot of people have said, and he seems like a really good guy overall as well. And I think that he is someone who deserves to be racing. He showed some potential this year in IndyCar, had some decent top 10 runs, I believe, throughout the year. And I'm really disappointed to see that he has to address something like this, just like Pat O'Ward had to address another situation that we're not going to get into at this point. But I got to say, it's not surprising he has to address it because people have been running with this narrative that Robert, because of the unknowns of Prema, that he's not happy about being IndyCar. I think he wants to stay in IndyCar and continue racing going forward. I hope he can focus on that going forward, not listen to the noise and not listen to criticism, and work on trying to get better, prepared for next year and continue a really strong run at this point. Nonetheless, I really hope Robert does continue to get to race in IndyCar in the 2026 season. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, if you watch NHRA race that took place earlier today, you saw a very scary crash between Tony Stewart and I believe Doug Kalitta, I believe in the finals of the event. So going down the long straightaway, I believe in New England if I'm not mistaken, Doug Kalitta's car I believe ends up crashing and runs into Tony Stewart. They both have a really scary and a really bad pileup. Both cars end up getting destroyed and they both don't even know really what happens at this this point. Now, the good news is for both Tony Stewart and Doug Cleetus, they both were able to get out of their cars. Tony Stewart spoke, I believe, to multiple reporters, including Kelly Crandall as well about this, and Tony basically said he doesn't even really know what exactly happened with the wreck, to be honest. He kind of just saw a flash and kind of fell asleep a little bit at that point. He says he does have a little bit of a headache from the crash that happened, but the good news is Tony Stewart is okay. And that's the positive news here, that Tony Stewart is all right after a crash like that, because that is a really, really scary incident for Tony Stewart. I saw the wreck, and while it's not as bad as other wrecks we've seen in NHRA, crashes like that can be extremely scary and really, really dangerous. So for Tony, the most important thing is that Tony Stewart is all right after a crash like that and was able to get out of the vehicle, because for Tony, I think he's someone who's doing a fantastic job in the NHRA this year, even with some of the stuff that's been going on this year, how dominant he's been and how strong he's been at points and winning races and making it and win the regular season championship as well. It's disappointing to see him involved in a crash. Nothing he could do in that situation. He didn't have control over the vehicle at that point. Nonetheless, big news there. Hopefully Tony Stewart is going to be cleared to go racing going forward. I think he's got a race coming up later today, as a matter of fact, so who knows at this point, but glad to see Tony Stewart is able to walk away from the incident and the crash that happened on the track. And now we're going to head to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch has continued to be on an incredible roll in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Going into this weekend's Xfinity Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway, Connor Zilisch was looking to make history and get his 5th straight win in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and his 8th win in the last 9 events. Well, unfortunately for Connor Zilisch, Marty Lane would make a little bit of a unfortunate strategy call that would cost Connor Zilisch an opportunity and chance to go to victory lane, and would end up finishing, instead of winning, would go out there and finish in 5th. That is still the worst finish he's had since Mexico City, and now his 15 consecutive top 5 finishes. He made a funny tweet after the race by saying, hey, basically, it's kind of crazy that I'm a little mad about finishing 5th. But that just shows how strong Connor Zilisch's numbers have been. It increased his average finish in the last 15 races from like a 1.9 to like a 2.0 or 2.1 at this point. It really did not go up much, which just shows how insanely incredible Connor Zilisch has been up to this stretch. And I think that is going to continue. I think he's going to get back to his winning ways. I think he's going to be really good this week, next week at Kansas, because he was really strong there last year when he drove the 88 car, and I expect him to be a really big factor in that event. But to continue having so much consistency in the field, I think that's really impressive on Connor Zilisch's part. He's been doing an unbelievable and great job this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Obviously, we all know, of course, he'll be moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series next year with Trackhouse Racing, which I think he's got a really strong chance and opportunity to win the title next year. Not win the title, but win races next year as a rookie. There's a potential possibility on that. It's been impressive to see what he's been doing this year. He's been doing a phenomenal and really, really good job. I think he'll continue doing that. I would not be surprised if he finishes every race inside the top 5 going forward and gets more wins for the end of the season as he continues to have an unbelievable and great year. Of course, Eric Almirola will be the driver who go to victory lane in that event. And now we're going to head to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Eric Brennan. Now, I talked a little bit about Eric Brennan a little bit earlier, but I was kind of teasing a little bit about the Eric Brennan stuff. So Matt Weaver, who of course now works on motorsports.com, put out a really good tweet in regards to Eric Brennan, and basically said that Eric Brennan should be calling a lot more ARCA races going forward, and should be calling NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races going forward into the future as well. I 100% agree with Matt Weaver on this. I believe Eric Brennan is absolutely a really fantastic lead commentator. Say what you want to say about some of the ARCA coverage we've seen with all the remote stuff. Eric Brennan, in my opinion, does an unbelievable and really good job. He's done a really good job on the ARCA races so far this year. I think him and Phil Parsons have done a really good job as a duo on the ARCA broadcast throughout the season as well. This is no offense to Brent Stover. I know Brent Stover is doing the best he can, but Brent Stover is not even on the same level as Eric Brennan. Every time we hear that Eric Brennan is going to be the lead commentator, I get so excited about it because I know he's going to do a phenomenal job out there. And this is no disrespect to Jamie Little. I don't know why Fox is continuing to employ Jamie Little as the lead commentator. She should be on pit road. That is where she shines and does a really fantastic job. I do not understand why they continue to put her up in the Fox Sports booth as a lead commentator. You have to command and be the lead broadcaster when you're doing it. You can't be all over the place not knowing what's going on with the lead broadcast. You need to have someone up there that knows what they're doing. And Eric Brennan is that guy, in my opinion. He does a fantastic and really, really good job every time he gets up in the booth. And I really hope long-term he does continue being in the booth. And I think he will long-term be the future replacement for Mike Joy. Or if he can get Rick Allen, though he's with the CW now, maybe he can try to convince Rick Allen to come over and do some truck coverage. But to me, I think Eric Brennan should absolutely be in the Fox Sports booth as a truck lead commentator. It blows my mind he's not, and it's disappointing that he's not probably going to be doing truck coverage, and probably Jamie Little will continue doing that, which is really disappointing stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mexico City. As it was announced and confirmed over the weekend on Saturday that IndyCar will not be going to Mexico City in 2026. IndyCar did release a statement on Saturday that confirming that while they've been trying desperately to get a race out there in Mexico City throughout the year, and talks were advancing at that point, the reason they said in this statement is because of the World Cup going on at that time is a major reason for that. But there's other reasons we'll get to in just a second. Meanwhile, obviously, of course, Pat O'Ward did release his side of things, and he said, listen, I've been really pushing for this event to happen as well, and I really hope we do get to have that happen in the future. We do get to race in IndyCar there. It just didn't seem like it was the right time and right opportunity for IndyCar to head out there. That's what Pato said in his statement. Now, I do think the World Cup is a factor for sure for Mexico City not being on the schedule in 2026. I think that definitely plays a little bit of a role for sure. But I don't think that the World Cup is the only reason that this event is not taking place in 2026. We've been seeing it for 10 years. They've been talking about wanting to go to Mexico City for 10 years at this point. They've been really pushing it now, and they haven't been able to accomplish it at this moment. The other big reason that I think this event is not happening is because of another competing series that's owned by Liberty Media, that also owns Live Nation and Ticketmaster, that being Liberty Media, who also owns Formula One. I think because Formula One is majorly involved with the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez track, I think that's also a big reason why NASCAR is not going back there in 2026 as well. As for some of the other IndyCar stuff, we know the Laguna Seca is heavily rumored to be the season finale for IndyCar. We are expecting that the schedule will be coming sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours, according to what Tony Donahue has said. It could be out by the time you're all watching this. It could be out on Tuesday. There's a potential possibility on that. There's some other things that are expected to be confirmed in the near future, but I'm disappointed to hear this news that Mexico City will not be on the IndyCar schedule next year. Am I fully surprised? No, to be honest. I'm not completely shocked on that, to be honest, because I kind of expect things to not go right with IndyCar. Everything seems like they touch it. They kind of screw, to be honest, on some areas. And it's disappointing to hear this news. But at the same token, at the same time, I'm not completely shocked and surprised considering we've seen them fail at other things before. That being the Penske Entertainment Group, though Fox is involved. It's definitely disappointing news here that Mexico will not be on the schedule for 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Bristol Tire. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway, you saw a very fantastic and really, really good race. It felt like an old school event at Bristol Motor Speedway. The bottom was being run very good. You had to manage your tires, and while, yes, tires went off very, very quickly within 30 to 40 laps, it seems like as the runs were going on, you could definitely tell that some drivers are managing them a little bit better. One of those drivers being Brad Keselowski, who was extremely positive about the race at the end of the event. There were some drivers also that were really not happy about it, Kyle Larson being one of them. If you listen to his in-car, he wasn't happy about it. It seemed like Carson Osbar, who actually was really good last night as well, he was not very happy about some of the tire stuff going on at the end of the event. But I think that complaining is a little bit there. And of course, you had Goodyear with their response after they were interviewed by people in the media by basically saying, our goal was to have a tire that where NASCAR told us we need to have a tire that could wear. And that's exactly what we put out there. It's so crazy to me. You go back to the practice session, right, where we ran 70-75 laps with very little to no wear when the temperature was almost 100 degrees on the track. You then cool off about 20 to 25 degrees, around 75 degrees track temperature, and these tires are falling off. Brad Keselowski, I think, kind of said it best. I don't know what crazy scientist needs to be asked about what's going on here, but what's been happening here at a couple of those Bristol races is absolutely wild and chaotic to see. And I think that we had a very successful event. I get that maybe the tire weared a little bit too quickly for some people. I wish it could be gradual wear throughout. But hey, I'd rather watch what we saw last night than watch some of the other Bristol races like the spring race where Kyle Larson led almost every single lap, pretty much led flag to flag in the race in the last two races prior to this one and just leads every single lap at that point. So to me, I really enjoyed this race. It was really, really fun, and you're not going to see this tire replicated at other tracks because it might not work at other tracks as good, but to me, I really had a lot of fun with this race. It was really, really enjoyable, and I get that some will disagree, and that's fine and understandable, but I think most people will come out of this race being really happy and really positive about it, and to me, I think it was a really fun, really exciting, and great race, all things considered, and I think it's one of the best Bristol races we've seen with the next gen era, probably 9.5 out of 10. It was crazy to see how quick that tire weared in the event, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Patrick Emerling. As it was announced, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday, that Patrick Emerling will drive the number 7 for Spire Motorsports this weekend in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. This is going to be the best opportunity that Patrick Emerling has had in his NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series career. Now, I believe he has driven a 07 truck before for the organization, but he's going to a better truck in the team because the 7 truck has gone to victory lane so far in the Craftsman Truck Series this year with 2 drivers, that being Kyle Busch and, of course, Carson Hocebar. Kyle Busch winning at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Carson Hocebar winning in that truck at Kansas Speedway. And Patrick Emerling, in my opinion, is someone who's never been really given a top-level opportunity. But when he's been given decent opportunities, he does a pretty good job behind the wheel. And I do expect that Patrick will be super fast and really competitive in this event with the team. I don't think he's the favorite to win because guys like Corey Heim and Lane Riggs are going to be really, really good in this race. But we've seen this truck nearly win with Corey Day this year, and we've seen other drivers get behind the wheel and do an awesome and really, really good job as well. And I do expect the same going into this year for Patrick Emerling because he has so much experience compared to other drivers in this field. And I think he's going to do he's just going to do a really good job this week. And I'm so excited for this. And he's got good sponsorship. Psyops is actually sponsoring him, which is a really big deal, which could have some affiliation to RSS Racing because there's been talk about an organization with Ford like RSS maybe going over to Chevrolet. They also have association with the Viking Motorsports team as well. So it seems like there's some potential changes going over there for next year. Who knows at this point, but nonetheless, I think this is an amazing opportunity for Patrick. I think he'll be really solid and really, really good with the team in New Hampshire. I think he'll be a factor for a potential, not a win, because again, I think Corey Heim, Lane Riggs, Chandler Smith are all going to be really, really good, but I look for Patrick to be a factor and at least maybe get a top 10. It's a great opportunity. Looking forward to see what Patrick Emerling can do this weekend at New Hampshire. I think he'll be very solid and really, really good this weekend at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. Now, there's been a lot of news in regards to NASCAR 25 that has been released over the course of the last couple days. First, it was announced, I believe, on Wednesday that the track list has been officially revealed for the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, the Craftsman Truck Series, and the ARCA Menards Series as well. Now, a lot of the standalone tracks like Elko, I believe, and among other dirt tracks like DuQuoin and Illinois State Fairgrounds are not in the game. There's 2 glaring races, or 3 glaring tracks that are not in the game. I believe Bowman Gray and Mexico City and Portland are not in the game, unfortunately. Bowman Gray, I believe, has been on iRacing before, so disappointing to see that. Same with the Gato John Hermanos Rodriguez track. I'm disappointed to see that not in the game, so maybe they're going to put Chicagoland in place potentially because we know Chicagoland will be on the schedule next year, but that's a little bit disappointing to see. Some big news though. Gameplay is coming out very, very soon. I believe they announced that gameplay will be coming out on the 8th, 17th, or 18th. So in the next couple days, we should be getting gameplay for NASCAR 25. They also announced the pre-order days. If you do get the 72-hour pre-order, you will be able to get a lot of DLC among other things as well. I will say for NASCAR 25, there are definitely some positive things to look at for sure, but there's also some negatives with the game. But I will say I'm becoming more and more cautiously, but I'm definitely becoming a little bit more positive for sure. And again, there are some things that are missing at this point from the game, but I think we got to remember this is game number 1 that they are managing at this point. This isn't like the 3rd or 4th game that they've had. This is still the first year game that they still have at this point. So it's going to take some time for them to get things absolutely perfect at the moment, but at the same time, I think there's been a lot of positive news to come out from this game. The soundtrack, I think is actually really solid for sure. There's some really good things to look at from that at this point, and to me, I'm definitely becoming more and more excited about this game. I'm looking forward to it. I love to see the game. I'm just waiting for the gameplay to come out at this point to really get an indication on how good the game exactly will end up being at this point. I really hope it is a good game, definitely. I think that it's going to be not perfect. I don't think it's going to be on the same level as NASCAR Thunder 2004. If it's like that, that's going to be a huge win for the NASCAR gaming community, in my opinion. But I think there's a lot of good things to look at for sure from NASCAR 25. We'll see what happens, but nonetheless, I'm glad to see we're finally getting some indications on some of the things around NASCAR 25, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Holler Talk podcast. Now, there were a couple things that were talked about on the Holler Talk podcast that kind of got taken a little bit out of context from it, and Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck have kind of rebutted some of those things that were talked about on the Holler Talk podcast. Let's first begin by talking about super speedways. There was something brought up about the potential possibly of something they were looking at of maybe adding a fourth stage to super speedways in the NASCAR Cup Series in the future. Now, that's something they've talked about before, but that's something they are not expected to do currently at the moment, is add a fourth stage as super speedways, which I gotta say, that would be a really, really big positive if they don't add another stage as super speedways. Let's be real and honest here. We do not need to see another stage added to super speedways. I think the biggest thing you got to look at is working on the next-gen car. That's the thing we got to work on, because the next-gen car has caused a lot of issues and problems when it comes to the racing product in the Cup Series on super speedways. You see how good the Xfinity Series product is? It is so much better than the NASCAR Cup Series product is currently at the moment. If you add a fourth stage, well, yes, you might be able to mitigate some of the fuel-saving racing going on, which I think that will help a little bit. It still wouldn't fix the problems of the next-gen car. Again, some of the biggest common denominators in NASCAR right now that do need to be fixed is this next-gen car. So to me, super speedways do need to be a priority on getting fixed, and I think there's some aerodynamic changes that do need to be fixed with that at this point. The other thing let's talk about is the playoff format. Now, we will talk about the playoff format here in just a little bit because some drivers talked about it. They sounds like, according to them, there is a potential possibility that they could reveal the playoff format in the coming weeks, but Mike Ford did say on the podcast they're still working on some things. There actually is a meeting that is coming up very, very soon with a lot of people that are on the playoff committee. People like Mark Martin, Christopher Bell, Jeff Gluck are part of that playoff committee, same with Joe Logano as well, and they're all going to be going in and looking at the formats. We've heard rumors about a 3-3-4 format, so we might see less people in. There's a lot of questions on exactly how that is going to work at this point, because I think a lot of people are kind of wondering how that exactly is going to fly. I think that's going to definitely be something to watch for sure, is to figure out how the format exactly is going to work for that. But it sounded like what they were saying is we still got some things to do. We're going to have a meeting coming up here soon. Makes a lot of sense with them being in other parts, like they're going to be at New Hampshire, which is interesting. I'm a little surprised they're not doing it at the Charlotte Roval, to be honest, but it sounds like we are getting closer to potential new format being announced here very, very soon, which I think is really exciting because we need to see a new format for the playoffs, especially. I think everyone's kind of tired of the current format that we have. So I really hope there are some changes going forward really soon on that front. But we'll talk about that here in just a second. But it looks like we may be looking at something new here very soon. And we'll see what the format does look like for the NASCAR Cup Series Playoffs coming up very soon. We'll see what ends up happening here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the playoff format once again. Now, we talked about a little bit of it in the most recent story around some things on the Holler Talk, but over the weekend, there were some drivers that had their thoughts and opinions on the playoff format. We've obviously heard a lot of rumors as of late about what the potential playoff format could look like for the 2026 year. Jordan Bianchi reported on Door Bumper Clear earlier this week. What he has said is it looks like it could be a 3-3-4 format for 2026, where there'll be 3 races in the first round, 3 races in the second round, and 4 races in the final round. Instead of having one championship event, you'd have 4 races to determine a champion at the end. Kyle Busch kind of spoke about it by saying that you can exploit the format all you want to, make as many changes to the format as you want to. It still is not going to fix the problems that we have currently at the moment. Chase Elliott says it will be a better format if it is like that, but it still doesn't fix some of the issues and manipulation among other things. I think that's something he kind of said speaking to the media. He basically is still in favor of a full season format, and another person who's absolutely in favor of a full season format is Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher even put a tweet out earlier today by basically saying a 36 race format. He's clearly in favor of having the full points format, which I am a little bit more on the side of Chase Elliott and Chris Buescher, and same with Christopher Bell as well, who are all in favor of a full season format at this point, where basically we don't have any playoffs, we don't have any of that stuff going on. I think we all can agree that that is kind of direction that I think we should be going at this point, with the sport not growing as much. Now, earlier this week, in some data from some of the things that they spoke to industry members in regards to the lawsuit, which we're going to talk about here in just a short little bit. They basically did confirm that they are likely going to be announcing that format very, very soon for 2026. And according to what was also said by Adam Stern from earlier tonight, they are not a big fan of the one race title, and many industry members do agree that the one race title is not the way to go with the championship, and they want to see the one race title go away. I'm glad that most of the industry has come to that conclusion at this point, because they want this big Game 7 moment. That's going to happen every single year. That's what they think is going to happen, is if you have a Game 7 moment, and you're going to have those Game 7 moments every time. But when you have Game 7 moments all the time, it is not special. There's a reason why Game 7 moments are considered Game 7 moments. That's why I remember the 1992 championship race. That's why I remember the 2011, because you don't see that every single time. If you keep doing the same thing every single time and not let it naturally happen, you open up to stuff like this happening where we can see a lot more maybe undeserving champions at this point. Granted, I think you get some chaos that happens with this playoff format, which is really interesting, but I also think that you can get some of that chaos even without the playoff format at this point. We've seen a lot of great moments happen in the sport with some stuff like that. To me, though, when it comes to a one-race championship, again, I'm just glad to see that the industry has kind of come to a consensus that the one-race championship is not the way to go. We need to get rid of that at this point, I think, for the sport to move on. I'm not still the biggest fan of the 4-race championship, but I think it's better than what we have right now. But eventually, I like to see 10 races if we're going to do some sort of postseason in some way, shape, or form. I think you got to have more than 4 races. I think you got to have at least 5 for sure. Definitely maybe up to 10 or 12 at this point, because that'd be a lot better than having just a one race, even a few races at this point. But it'll be very interesting to see what format gets revealed in the future. It seems like we're not too far away from getting that confirmed. We'll see what happens, and we'll see if we do get a format for next year. But it seems like a lot of drivers are in a consensus that things need to change with the format, and I hope it does happen here really, really soon. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaulig racing. Now, earlier this week, and shout out to Kaulig Nation for putting a post on this, Chris Rice went on Sirius XM NASCAR like he usually does every single Thursday. He used to do it Wednesdays, and he's pushed that now to Thursdays at this point. Now, according to what he said on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, it seems like Kaulig Racing is getting a lot closer to announcing their 2026 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series lineups and also their Cup and Xfinity Series lineups for 2026 as well. Let's first begin by talking about the Cup Series lineup. There is not expected to be a change for that lineup for 2026. Both Ty Dillon and AJ Allmendinger are expected to return to their respective rides for next year. AJ did confirm that back in Nashville a couple months back that he is expected to return to the team, and he has a long-term contract with the program. We've been waiting for a contract extension announcement for Ty Dillon for quite some time at this point, but many, including myself, do expect that, because Ty Dillon is expected to maybe pick up some sponsorship from Freeway Insurance going next year, with Daniel Swartz not returning to Trackhouse next year. Freeway, from my understanding, does want to stick around in the NASCAR Cup Series next year, though, so that is likely going to be the case. Ty Dillon is expected to stick with the program next year. It's also expected to be confirmed more than likely that Christian Eckes will be their likely only full-time driver next year. I've heard conflicting things that they may have multiple cars next year full-time. They could still have 2 full-time entries. They could have a full-time car and then a part-time car, or a car of rotation drivers. Sounds like Kaulig will be downsizing their program going into next year for their Truck Series team, but I do expect Christian Eckes to be the one full-time confirmed driver for the team next year. Now we talk a little bit, of course, about who's going to be in the lineup for next year. We have heard Brendan Butterbean Queen's name linked over to Kaulig Racing for next season. He's been the hot shot favorite for the Kaulig Racing team, and it helped the fact that he did run for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Bristol Motor Speedway. So I would expect Brendan to be one of the drivers in that program for sure for next year. There has been a lot of talk about Daniel Dye potentially being a candidate for the seat, and that would not surprise me or shock me either. Daniel Dye, of course, they confirmed and announced that they were going to be forming this Truck Series team at Daniel Dye's father, Randy Dye's shop. So it definitely make a lot of sense for sure for Daniel Dye to go over there. We've heard rumors about Wallace Allen potentially being a candidate for this team. We've also heard a potential other name that has emerged, like LeVar Scott perhaps. And there's other veterans that could be candidates like Daniel Hemrick and Corey LaJoie who could end up over there, which is why maybe one of the McAnally trucks might be open for next year at this point. But again, we should be in the near future getting confirmations on what the Truck Series lineup is going to look like for 2026 for Kaulig Racing. They said that they already kind of know what the initial plans are for 2026. We could see Hailie Deegan over there, though she is in rumor talks to go to McAnally Hilgeman for next year, which we'll get into here in just a short little bit. But I got to say, I am very intrigued and very excited to see what the lineup exactly is going to be for the Kaulig Racing team going into 2026, because there's a ton of questions around that at this point on exactly who's going to be where, which drivers they're going to get. And they also mentioned as well, I think they've hired 150 people into the organization, some new for their team that might be coming from Spire. Spire might be selling some of their stuff off to the Kaulig Racing team, though that's not been officially confirmed at this point. But Kaulig, like I said, they are not too far away from announcing things for their Truck Series lineup, and also not too far away from confirming some of their other lineups as well with their Cup and Xfinity lineup, and expect some other drivers in that front. We could see Will Brown come back and race NASCAR next year too, by the way. Who knows at this point? But nonetheless, I think it's really exciting stuff, and we should be here very, very soon knowing who will be of Kaulig. And people saying Daniel Suarez, no, Daniel Suarez is not going to Kaulig Racing next year, so you can stop putting that in the comment section. He's not going to Kaulig Racing at this time for 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking a little bit of silly season. Now, over the weekend at Bristol Motor Speedway, there were a couple drivers that spoke about their silly season and their future plans for the 2026 year, and 3 high-profile drivers. Let's first begin by talking about Brendan Poole. After the NASCAR Xfinity Series race concluded, Brendan Poole spoke to the media after having a really strong and fantastic run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Bristol, scoring a top 10. Brendan Poole was asked about what his plans are currently at the moment for the 2026 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. He says he doesn't have anything officially announced and confirmed for 2026, but he is hoping to return to the Alpha Prime Racing team for the 2026 year, because he loves driving for the team and has been having a ball with the program. It would be a bad move to get rid of Brendan Poole if you're Alpha Prime. He absolutely needs to come back to the team next year, unless another really good team, maybe that Kaulig truck team, picks him up. It would make no sense, in my opinion, to not have Brendan Poole with this program. He has been the best driver in Alpha Prime Racing history, in my opinion. He's been really strong with this team the last couple years. He's currently sitting in the top 20 in the regular season standings as well. He's had 5 top 10s this year, has been extremely consistent at points, a top 20 driver on a week-by-week basis. It would make no sense to get rid of him. I would expect him to stick around with the Alpha Prime team next year, but it all depends on what happens with some of the other silly season stuff that happens on that front. Moving on to some other drivers, let's talk about Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith has not officially confirmed what his plans are for 2026 at this point, but Bob Parker did note a couple months back that he has heard that Chandler Smith more than likely will return to Front Row Motorsports in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. It would make a lot of sense. Chandler Smith has been having a really strong year with the Front Row team. I get he's below the cutoff line currently at the moment in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, but I think that he has been doing a fantastic and really good job with this team. He's picked up 2 wins so far this year, including a win earlier in the year at Bristol, and picking up a win, of course, at North Wilkesboro as well, after Corey Heim kind of got dumped by Lane Briggs in the event. But he's been one of the few drivers that has been up there with Corey Heim all season long. And with Corey not expected to return to the Truck Series next year full-time, as Caden Honeycutt is expected to replace Corey in that 11 truck next year, I think Chandler Smith returning to the front row is a no-brainer. And if he does return next year, he will be one of the championship favorites going into the 2026 year. But the last big one's obviously Brendan Butterbean Queen. We have obviously heard a lot of talk, and we talked about it just a little bit ago, that Brendan Butterbean Queen is expected to be going full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series next year with Kaulig Racing. We still are waiting on the numbers to be confirmed at this point right now for that team, but Brendan's name continues to be linked over to that program for 2026, as Brendan has been doing a really, really strong job in ARCA with 6 wins so far this year. I get it's not been working out too well in his favor in his select starts in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, but he hasn't been with the high-level team. If he was with Junior Motorsports, I think he'd be doing a lot better of a job at this point. But Brendan is expected to go over to Kaulig in the Truck Series next year. Some other things to know, obviously Daniel Suarez's future is in question. We've heard Junior Motorsports and Spire are the likely landing spots for him next year. He's not going to Kaulig next year. Connor Zolci's number and other things still need to be confirmed for next year. We do know Connor, of course, will be with Trackhouse full-time next year. Justin Marks did say about 3 weeks ago that he did say that they're getting close to announcing some things around that front at this point. You have some other drivers like Corey LaJoie who are not confirmed for next year. Corey Day, we also know, is expected to be full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with the Hendrick Motorsports team, as they're expected to have potentially multiple cars in the Xfinity Series, 1 part-time car and 1 full-time car next year. We're also waiting on what the future is going to be for other drivers like Josh Williams and Andres Perez, like I mentioned in the silly season update that I did not too long ago. We'll probably get an announcement on that here very, very soon. Nonetheless, so very interesting stuff and some pretty big silly season news, and we'll probably hear more about some of the silly season stuff coming up here very soon in the not-so-distant future, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports NASCAR lawsuit once again, as we've had a pretty big update in regards to the 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit once again. So, 2311 and Front Row Motorsports have asked for a summary judgment against NASCAR in regards to NASCAR's counterclaim against them for 2026. Shall NASCAR continue going on with this counterclaim? They will likely file, I think, a defamation lawsuit, I'm pretty sure, against NASCAR at this point. And they're asking for summary judgment, which Judge Kenneth Bell very likely will deny that summary judgment at this point. But now, in recent days, we've gotten some new information in regards to some things that got heard in the court case for preliminary injunction. Now, we all know at this point that 2311 and Front Row lost their charters. They lost their preliminary injunction, and they will not be granted the charters, as NASCAR has granted that they basically will not sell the charters they have currently at the moment for 2025, and they won't sell those charters for 2026 at this point as well. But over the weekend, there's been some new documents that have surfaced in regards to that vertical integration thing that NASCAR had been planning at this point. And there's a lot of very interesting information that came out. So some things to know, if they were boycotts, because there was a lot of talk about this during the charter negotiations, so that is something that does need to be noted at this point. Some of the things that were noted about potential boycotts during the race. If teams boycotted during the race and all the teams part of the charter agreement, they would cancel qualifying and basically put out a PR response to what is going on. If they postponed, a lot of teams got involved with it in the future, or basically got involved with another boycott, NASCAR could postpone the event and make the Support Series race, which is the Xfinity Series, and then the Craftsman Truck Series. They would then go ahead and make that the main event. If there is a Cup Series race that has to be postponed because of boycott going on, then NASCAR would have the Support Series, which, let's say the Xfinity Series was at Portland and the Cup Series was at Darlington at the time. They'd have to cancel the Xfinity race at Portland, then move them to Darlington and make them the main event at that point. Then continuing on with other things we noted, it could be multiple weeks. This only be in a race a weekend, among other things. Continuing on in the 6-month stretch, there was a lot of talk about some other teams that were apparently interested in maybe getting a charter. Among those teams was Junior Motorsports, Sam Hunt Racing, Tricon Garage, Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan, Chip Ganassi Racing, and among other things like some of the IMSA teams like Riley, Action Express Racing, which is owned by Jim France, who of course owns NASCAR, among other things. I think like Turner Motorsports is mentioned there, I'm pretty sure, and a lot of other teams in IndyCar like Andretti Global would also potentially have been able to get a charter had this gone through. But there are some other interesting names that were noted as potential charter holders. One of those being Phyllis Newhouse, who of course is a massive entrepreneur. Mumford & Sons, which is definitely very interesting for sure, and there were some other names that really caught my attention and my eye. The big one obviously being Junior Motorsports. There's been a lot of rumors about Junior Motorsports maybe here getting a charter in the not so distant future and having a team in the NASCAR Cup Series. There's been a lot of talk about that in recent years. It'd be really cool if Junior Motorsports could have a team in the NASCAR Cup Series. Are they going to fully have a Cup Series team? Probably not at this point right now, because you're going to need a charter, and obviously if they would have gotten the charter, the NASCAR been planning to hand out, which they could still hand out a charter by week and have an extended field at this point, but they would have been able to do that at that point right there, where they can hand a charter team like Junior Motorsports, Sam Hunt Racing. Tricon Garage is another team that was mentioned. There's been rumors about Tricon being interested in having a Cup Series team and making more starts instead of just a Daytona 500, and then some of those drivers that are part of these teams, like a Tyler Reddick, like a Bubba Wallace, among other things, could have been part of these organizations. NASCAR then also eventually got to the vertical integration side of things, and they talked about maybe the Xfinity Series like multi-class races going on, where you have the teams that are chartered teams getting preference and preferential treatment, then unchartered teams that then get unpreferential treatment second, then you have the Xfinity Series trucks, ARCA, and so on and so forth, going down the line if they need to field the field. And then, of course, they had the vertical integration going in, where NASCAR was looking to have a plan if a boycott would end up happening, where they basically were going to take all of the teams and basically put them all into the slot like Monster Jam does, where they basically own the teams that have 5 OEM slots. They basically have about 80 or 90 potential lots open there, and they would have them for 5 different OEMs. Most likely Dodge and Honda would be the 2 teams that would have been on the side as the other 2 manufacturers. Those have been the 2 rumored manufacturers that could go Cup racing. Then you have Chevy, Ford, and then of course Toyota as being the 3 main manufacturers that are in NASCAR at this point right now. If NASCAR would have gone on with this and actually had done this, which again, this is during the CHAR negotiation, so keep that in mind, but if they actually had done this in a couple years, because this would have been for 2027, if they would have done this as a potential thing, it would have been an awful look for the sport, and it would have not been a good thing that NASCAR would have done. So I'm glad that NASCAR actually decided not to go toward the vertical integration side of things, because they were definitely really frustrated. Also with the way CHAR negotiations are going, from everything I know, you see in the text messages among other things, and there's still potential some of this stuff could end up happening in the not so distant future as well right now. But a lot of drivers could be affected by this, and you have a lot of teams that are very untrustworthy of NASCAR at this point. And now we know some of the documents are out there. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forward in future silly season if something like this does end up happening once again. But it's a massive update nonetheless, and kind of wild to see some of the plans NASCAR might have had should a boycott had happened and potentially strike on NASCAR against some of these teams. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Cleetus McFarland. Now, Cleetus McFarland competed in his final ARCA Menards Series start of the 2026 year, 25 year, I should say, racing at Bristol Motor Speedway. We talked a little bit about this on the channel on Thursday before the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race took place. Cleetus did end up finishing in 17th place, about 6 or 7 laps down. He was likely going to finish inside the top 15 in the event, but unfortunately, with around 20 laps to go in the race, Cleetus McFarland had a flat tire, got in the outside wall, but he didn't hit the outside wall hard enough to get a ton of damage on the car, so he got back out on the racetrack and would end up finishing in 17th place because a couple guys, I believe like Tony Constantino, and then of course Timmy Hill had a flat tire. He was able to get back by him and jump from being 19th up to 17th position, which for Bristol Motor Speedway in the first time he's ran an ARCA car at that track, he did a pretty solid job, all things considered. I know he didn't get an unbelievable and great finish in this event, but I think he did the best he could considering all the circumstances that were surfacing around him at that point. But he also did confirm as well after the ARCA race concluded that he is confirming that he'll be back in ARCA and potentially could be racing in NASCAR in the 2026 year. Obviously, he did confirm, speaking on the radio to his spotter, Kevin Hamlin, who, of course, is a spotter for Alex Bowman at this moment right now. He basically did confirm that he will be back racing at Daytona. Now, this could imply two potential things. It could confirm they'll be back racing in ARCA in 2026, and this is the most likely outcome at this point, that he will likely be back with Rhett Jones racing in 2026 in ARCA. That would be the most likely option at this point. I think Cleetus is planning to run around 8 to 10 ARCA races next year from what a lot of people are saying. But this could also mean that Cleetus McFarland could be racing in NASCAR in 2026. Now, we have heard rumors about Cleetus potentially coming to NASCAR. So how could Cleetus get in? Well, he could potentially run with the Dodge program and the Ram program in 2026. We obviously know that we had heard some rumors about Rhett Jones Racing being a team that could have a Truck Series program with Dodge. They had a former relationship with Dodge many, many years ago, but they've confirmed they're not going to be there. Obviously, Call It Racing is going to be the only Dodge team in 2026, and there is going to be an all-star truck that is going to be out there in the 2026 year. And Cleetus' name has been linked as a possibility. Now, though Tim Knickis has denied this at this point, that is going to happen, where he basically is going to do that. So we'll have to kind of wait and see there if Cleetus gets a chance and opportunity. But I would love to see Cleetus make some starts in the Craftsman Truck Series. We know that Greg Biffle has said that if Cleetus does get the chance and opportunity to race in the Craftsman Truck Series in the future, even the Xfinity Series down the road, he absolutely would love the chance and opportunity to compete against Cleetus McFarland. I think that'd be really, really cool. There is a potential Rhett Jones could still race in the Truck Series next year, but for Cleetus, he brings a lot of eyeballs on the sport. That's what's so important for the sport currently at the moment, is trying to get a lot of engagement, a lot of eyeballs. When you look at the ARCA numbers most of the time, I mean, the ARCA race a couple weeks back at the Illinois State Fairgrounds got 43,000 viewers, or at the coin, I should say. The Cleetus onboard got 35 to 40K views, so almost got more race people watching that than watch the race in DuQuoin. Now, granted, obviously, you have the Southern 500 going on, and more people are going to watch Southern 500 than they're going to watch an ARCA race at Illinois State Fairgrounds or DuQuoin. No disrespect to ARCA, but that's just the truth in facts. For Cleetus, though, he brings a lot of eyeballs onto the sport, and I think it'd be really, really awesome and great if Cleetus can get that chance and opportunity and race in NASCAR in the future and get some starts in the Cup Series. Not in the Cup Series, because I don't think he's any way near shape or form ready for Cup, but as he gets more experience, because he said it was very, very intense, I think he's going to get better as a race car driver because he is someone who has a lot of talent. He has shown potential. He's got multiple top 10s in ARCA this year. And overall, I think he's done an unbelievable job. It's kind of like a very similar transition for Shane Van Gisbergen, who unfortunately got eliminated in the playoffs in this first round. But SVG, of course, did get better at ovals, finished 26 at Bristol, which is a massive improvement over the last time we ran at Bristol, where SVG really struggled and didn't run very, very well, unfortunately, near the end. So I really hope we do see Cleetus back once again. Again, it sounds very likely that Cleetus McFarland will be back in ARCA next year. The rumor, like I said, is with Brett Jones Racing at this point. But again, there's also potential possibility that Cleetus McFarland could race in NASCAR. There is that potential possibility. And I think that's also a very big growing possibility at this point that we may see Cleetus make some starts in NASCAR next year. Again, it would be with the Truck Series more than likely, probably at super speedways like Talladega and Daytona, and maybe other big tracks like Atlanta he could get approved for. Who knows at this point? I don't know. Some have basically said that they don't think Cleetus would be basically approved because of certain tracks he's entered, but we've seen other drivers like Elliot Castroneves get approved to run the Daytona 500, even run ARCA race. SVG got approved and didn't run an oval outside of one short track oval race to run the ARCA events. So we'll see what happens down the road. But like I said, it sounds like Cleetus is going to be back racing once again in 2026, and very likely will be either in ARCA or NASCAR. We'll wait and see, but it'll either be with Brett Jones Racing or Colleague Racing in the 2026 year. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that front coming up here in 2026. We know it's going to be 8 to 10 races. We'll figure that out soon. He won't obviously be full-time because of focus on YouTube. We'll see if Cleetus does get the chance and opportunity to race in the sport once again in 2026. It's more than likely ARCA, but you never know. He could potentially be racing in the NASCAR Truck Series as well very, very soon. And now we're going to head, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, I've talked about the story a little bit on the channel over the course of the last couple of days because there's been a lot of talk about this as of recently. Now, the big person to bring this up was Breakheart on YouTube. He mentioned this on Twitter by basically saying, do not be surprised if you see Hailie Deegan return to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. Now, at the time, he did not elaborate on it further, but then he put out a video not too long ago, and a Daily Downforce also quoted what he said as well, and basically has confirmed that Hailie Deegan was recently spotted in a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series shop, and she could potentially be exploring her options to race in that team in 2026. So a lot of people are going to look at the teams and manufacturers. Many people looked at the Colleague Racing team as a potential landing spot. It would make a lot of sense for her to be with that program, considering Hailie Deegan has a lot of fans that watch her. She still has a growing YouTube channel, and I know that Dodge and Ram are looking at someone that could bring a lot of eyeballs onto their platform. Hailie Deegan would absolutely fit that perfect mold for 2026, but would she do great? Probably not at this point. There's also been rumors about her going with Ford. It still has a Ford deal, but he did mention that it doesn't sound like it will be with Front Row. Front Row has been rumored, by the way, to have a third truck for next year. We have heard Taylor Gray mentioned as a possibility for that truck, but it also sounds like he may be back with Joe Gibbs Racing next year. There's some questions around that. Who knows what's going to happen if they do get that third truck? We'll have to kind of wait and see. Maybe it'll be one of the Cup guys like a Noah Grayson moving down to trucks. Who knows at this point? But we'll talk about the team here in just a second. Obviously, Hailie Deegan, we all know she had a very unceremonious exit from the sport in the middle of last year. She struggled in the Xfinity Series last year with AM Racing. She only scored 4 top 20 finishes throughout the year, only scored, I believe, 1 or 2 top 15 finishes all year. And she didn't look very good out on the racetrack. Now, that was not all on Hailie Deegan. There was a lot of issues with the team. There were crew chief changes that took place. Joe Williams got let go halfway through the year. And the team really, really floundered throughout the 2024 year. But they've definitely improved this year. And again, I think she was part of fault of AM Racing's issues, but I also think there were other issues with the team because drivers like Josh Berry struggled. The only driver that got top 10s was Joey Logano, who barely even made the field of Watkins Glen as it is and still got a top 10 in that event. The team just did not look good, but also I think it was clear as day at that time that even though she had that amazing run at Las Vegas, and she did run well at Vegas in the Xfinity Series, she just didn't do very, very well and was not ready to move up, and she was clearly rushed, and her time in trucks wasn't very good either. So I'm worried about if she goes there that she might crash quite a bit. Now, who is the rumor team that could be looking at Hailie Deegan for 2026? McAnally Hilgeman Racing is that team. According to what Breakard mentioned, McAnally Hilgeman Racing has been the team that has been heavily linked to Hailie Deegan for the 2026 season. They are looking, they haven't announced anything yet for their lineup for 2026, so the big question is what ride could she end up at? It could be the 19 truck next year. Obviously, she does have a former working relationship with McAnally Hilgeman Racing when she was with Toyota, so it makes some sense there a little bit with her former working relationship, and she'd be for the first time be with the Chevrolet team because she had a very unceremonious exit from the Indy NXT series where she completely struggled this year and was not expected to return to Indy NXT next year. McAnally is one of the best teams in trucks. They've won so far this year with Daniel Hemrick. They've won with Tyler Ankrum. They got 2 trucks in the playoffs. Connor Mosek's had some select good starts this year. And then there's Jack Wood on the racetrack, who has not looked very good so far this year. So for Hailie Deegan, if she does end up at McAnally, because that's the team that he mentioned was the shop that she entered, how do I think she'll do? I'm going to be really honest here. I don't think Hailie Deegan is going to do very, very good if she ends up over at the McAnally team next year. I just think that she'll run okay at best. I think she'll probably get some top 10s, maybe a couple, because let's be real here. She's way better than Tony Breidinger. She'll perform a lot better than her. But I don't really expect Hailie Deegan to set the world on fire in any way, shape, or form. I think she's going to have some of the same struggles that she had in 2023 in the Truck Series. She had in 2022 in 23 with Thorsport. 2022, look at that 13 truck now. Jake Garcia's had some really good runs. Yes, he's probably going to get eliminated from the playoffs at this point, because of his issues, but he still has looked really, really good this year with even a couple of pulls at this point, getting like 2 or 3 pulls in the Truck Series at the moment right now. I just think Hailie Deegan's going to have some struggles. Now, maybe she proves us wrong and runs very good, and she could potentially do that. That is absolutely a possibility of something like that happening, but I think we've seen this story time and time again. We all want to see her do really good in regardless of what sport she gets into, because we all remember how much hype there was with Hailie Deegan, right, when she came in. A lot of people like myself thought she was going to be really good. Even Kevin Harvick labeled her as the best driver in the field he went up against, that she had the most potential. That never really worked out, unfortunately. So I worry that she is going to struggle quite a bit if she, of course, is in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series next year. But the fact that we're continuing to hear rumors and rumblings around this tells me that there's probably a lot of truth around this at this point. And I think these rumors are going to grow. There's other drivers that might be involved with this team. Chris Wright's team has been linked as a possibility. Think about that for a minute, that Chris Wright could be with this team. Oh, God, don't test me on that, because Chris Wright's way worse than Hailie Deegan. Nonetheless, so if Deegan ends up there, I hope she does really, really well. But I don't have extreme confidence. I think she'll get some top 20s. I think she might get a couple occasional top 10s. And I think she is a competent driver. I just don't think Hailie Deegan is going to do really good if she ends up over there next year. So we'll see what happens for Deegan. And what would that mean for a guy like Daniel Hemrick? Hemrick could potentially go to Collie. That is a potential possibility with the Dodge program. There's going to be a lot of changes happening down in the lower series next year. We'll see what happens for Hailie Deegan and potential things, but it sounds like there is a chance that Hailie Deegan could potentially be headed to the Truck Series once again and racing for a team like McAnally in 2026. So that is going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Hailie Deegan is going to struggle? She ends up in McAnally? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And more thoughts about Cleetus coming back to ARCA next year, and your thoughts on some of the lawsuit updates. Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, we are going to have potentially some special content dropping. Of course, we will be having potentially the intros for New Hampshire coming out. Wednesday, we're going to have potentially race picks as well, along with the NASCAR news video. We could do a news video Tuesday, who knows at this point. And we got a lot of content coming out soon on people like Hailie Deegan, SVG, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Chase Light, Ryan Preece, among other things that we talk about on the channel in the coming days, in the coming weeks as well, along with Dodge and Ram, you name it too. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.